Students, I was talking about the chemical shift and how exactly the electron withdrawing groups, electron donating groups, they are all going to create or affect the chemical shift. Chemical shift is nothing but it is the effect of the environment in which that particular vibrating or resonating tiny magnet will be there, that is the protons, or you can say the resonating nucleus is going to be present. So, based on the effect of that environment, there will be change, that is splitting of the peak is going to take place. So, depending upon how many factors actually influencing that particular resonating nuclei. So, why I am using the word nuclei? Because see, we have different varieties of NMR. I was going to tell you this. So, this particular method of NMR is having H1 NMR, where depending upon the nuclei, chemical constituent of the nuclei. So, we can say there are H1 NMR, there is P31 NMR, N15 NMR, there is C13 NMR, like there are different NMRs. Only thing is that in all these particular case, people are going to concentrate on the nuclei having a odd number of protons, so that the nuclei is going to get a magnetic field strength, and which can resonate in response to the absorption of radio wave frequency under a particular applied magnetic field. So, that will be measured in the NMR spectroscopy. So, now if you come to this another aspect of NMR spectroscopy called relaxation. Relaxation is nothing but whenever a resonating magnet or resonating particle, or in other words we can say whenever any kind of molecule or an atom, when it absorbs energy, it is going to get into excited state. But once it gets once it is going to spend a little amount of time in the excited states, then it will again come back to the ground state. So, this coming back to the ground state is nothing but the relaxation. So, this relaxation can happen in different ways, that is the energy content which was got absorbed by the particular atom or a molecule can be lost. Either it can be lost in the form of heat, or it can be lost by in the form of light. So, and if you are going to talk about this nuclear magnetization and the loss of the energy content of this excited tiny magnet. So, this loss of energy and relaxation can happen in two ways. One, it is called as the spin lattice relaxation. So, in which the nuclear spin from high energy to low energy is going to happen by the emission of heat into the environment, that is the surrounding chemical moieties whichever is going to be there will take up the energy which is being released by this particular excited nuclear nucleus, and thereby the nuclei is going to become relaxed. So, this is called spin lattice. Spin means the excited spin in which the nucleus is being spinning. Now, it is going to get relaxed. See, what is the relaxation we are going to observe? Energy with which the spinning is taking place. The number of revolutions it was happening earlier, now it becomes lesser. So, it is going to now revolve not with that particular greater speed or velocity. Now, it will angular momentum is going to get little reduced. So, this process happens with a rate of T1 to the power minus 1 and T1 in terms of longitudinal relaxation time. Because of the change in magnetization of that nuclei parallel of the field, means parallel to the applied field. So, there will be change in the magnetization of it. The transverse magnetization of the nuclei is going to be observed there, and the another is called spin relaxation. Spin relaxation means here the energy of the one nuclei is going to come back to the ground state by transferring it to the another nuclei. So, which is going to get increases its spin. So, it is like one particular spinning nuclei to another spinning nuclei, energy will get transferred, and thereby it is going to, the first nuclei is going to get relaxed. And another term which we come across with in NMR spectroscopy is a free induction decay. See, this free induction decay is going to be because the measured signal in the NMR is re-emission of energy as a nuclei returned from high energy to the lower energy. See, the measurement whatever we do in case of NMR is for that particular signal, okay, and the recorded radiation will decay with the time. That means whenever an excited molecule or whenever an atom or a molecule observes this particular radio frequency and get excited, so then it gets relaxed, means so this excited atom or a molecule, what I can say it is a resonating magnet which is going to align and with the particular applied magnetic field. So this alignment will get altered after a short period of time, after some time. So this particular loss of energy is called the free induction decay. So this decay is not relaxation, this decay is the just a tiny amount of energy will be lost even in the excited state. Why it is going to get lost? It is used for the process of to takes place. For example, here the tiny magnet of the nuclei is spinning. So because of the spinning requires energy, and that energy is going to be used for the process. Okay. So that tiny amount of energy is the FID, that is the free induction decay. So which is measured as an energy difference is going to be measured. And this free induction decay is going to be very characteristics, and people have extensively used this particular property of the resonating nuclei as one of the factor in the measurement as well as in the study of different molecules in terms of its structure, kinetics and other parameters. So then we come across with another important factor in NMR, that is spin coupling. Spin coupling means, so here as we consider, instead of considering one single atom, if you are going to consider a molecule, the molecule can have number of nuclei of same type. For example, if I am doing an analysis by using H1 NMR. So this H1 NMR, when I am going to do, for example, let us say I took an example earlier, that is ethyl alcohol. So wherein you are going to come across with 6 protons, that is 6 hydrogens are there, so 6 H1s are there. Okay. So now in spin coupling it is nothing but it is also called as J coupling. So here what exactly happens is that due to the influence of one particular nuclei on the other nuclei, okay, or one group of nuclei on the other nuclei, so the peak which is going to be there, which is supposed to be generated for a particular nuclei, it should get generate one single peak, but instead due to the influence of other nucleus surrounding nuclei, so this peak is going to get split. So this peak splitting which I discussed earlier mainly happens because of a phenomenon called as spin coupling or J coupling, and this spin coupling or J coupling happens, for example, in CH3 group the 3 protons are there, in the 3 protons have a spin which can have plus half, minus half, all these kind of spins. So these are going to influence, one proton spin is going to influence the other proton spin, and that creates the splitting of the peak, and that is that's coupling of one spinning nuclei with the other spinning nuclei changes the spinning pattern as well as the resonation of both the nuclei. Okay. So the net spin experienced by the resonating conditions of, for example, in case CH2 is going to be 1:3:3:1. Possibilities are going to be there when you are going to arrange the spinning direction. For example, clockwise, anti-clockwise spin, we say no, clock if we are going to up arrow and anti-clock as down arrow. So you can see in this table, so how many varieties of spinning possibilities are there. For example, in CH2 when it is coupled with the CH3, so we can have spin like all are going to be aligned in the same direction, or 2 are going to be up, 1 is down. So with there 2 up and 1 down, there is 3 possibilities. and 1 up 2 down, there is again 3 possibilities, and all are down. So, that is another possibility. So, you have spinning states like 1 possibility, 3 possibility for 2 up, 3 possibility for 1 up, and 1 possibility for all down. So, that means 1 3 3 1, that is only 1:3:3:1. So, this 1:3:3:1 means there are 4 possibilities, 4 coupling is possible couplings are chances are there. So, therefore, when we are going to see the peak for CH2 with respect to CH3, we get 4 peaks there. Okay. So, 4 peaks because 4 splitting is going to take place. Now, based on this, people actually came out with an equation to suggest how many peaks are possible for a particular group or a nuclei within a molecule. So, for example, here with that came out like number of peaks is equal to 2 into n into I plus 1, that is not L, that is capital I plus 1. So, now what is here n is the number of nuclei, I is nothing but it is the spinning state, half or minus half, and plus 1. So, for example, in case of CH2, what we get? What we get is there are number of nuclei is going to be, the factors are going to be 3. For example, here you can see in CH2 group presenting values of the peaks expected as a result of coupling with the nearby CH3 proton is. So, CH3 has 3 protons plus 2 into 3 plus into I value is half, let us say all are up, and A plus 1. So, possibility is 4 peaks. Like that, for example, for CH3. For CH3 we can predict CH2 adjacent is going to be CH2. So, there are 2 protons. So, it will become 2 into 2 into half. So, that is going plus 1, that gives you 3. So, number of peaks possible for CH3 is 3. So, like this we can able to calculate how many number of peaks are going to be possible for a particular group or the resonating nucleus. The actual spacing between each of the peak in the NMR spectrum is called as coupling constant or J constant, and this J constant is a constant for a particular amount of chemical shift or particular molecule. Let us say closer together the coupled nuclei are in a particular molecule, the stronger is going to be the coupling, and hence the greater will be the J constant. Relative intensity of the peak in such multiplets, that is when you are going to get doublets, triplets, quadruplets. For example, here what we got peaks for CH3 we called as triplets, and peaks we got for CH2 we called as quadruplets, like that. So, multiplets, the area which is going to be, and it is found as a coefficient of binomial expansion of the form, that is 1 plus x to the power n, where n is the number of nuclei coupled. So, these factors are going to be very helpful. Okay. So, for example, you can see how exactly the binomial values are going to be obtained here, and the coefficients arising from the peak splitting due to the spin coupling with n nuclei of spin half can be calculated from this particular binomial, or more conveniently, and it is going to be obtained by the Pascal triangle. Pascal triangle, you can see this is the Pascal triangle for the different n values. And a situation where 2 nuclei A and B, for example, instead of 1 we have 2 nuclei, and with a I value is 0, okay, because plus of minus of. So, part of a single chemical group, then we can calculate the number of peaks expected by using a formula 2 into n into I plus 1 of A into 2 into m into I plus 1 of B, where m is going to be, n and m are the number of nucleus each, and I is their magnetic spin. Okay. So, that is how we can actually calculate the spin coupling or J constant, and also the how exactly it affects the NMR spectra. Now, another important factor is there which is also going to be playing a role in NMR spectra and affects the spectra and which gives the information about that particular atom or a molecule under study, that is nuclear Overhauser effect, or NOE. it is a relaxation parameter which has been used as a primary tool for determining the 3-dimensional molecular structure. So, whenever we go for the structure of a tiny molecule or a macromolecule, people use this NOE as one of the important factor in the analysis. So, what is this? When two nuclei are in sufficient close spatial proximity, there is going to be an interaction, there may be an interaction between the two dipole moments. When you take a particular group or a molecule, it may have dipole moments or dipoles in it, and they are going to can get interact, okay, when the two nuclei are going to be very sufficiently very close spatial proximity is there. This interaction of nuclear dipole moment and the magnetic field generated by another was already noted to provide the mechanism of relaxation. So, this is found, this effect is going to be found to be in a very short distance of about 0.5 nanometers, but this nuclear over-observed effect has a very important acts as a one of the important parameter in the structural analysis of small molecules as well as even macromolecules. Then we come across with another important factor which is going to give us information about a particular molecule or a group under the study is peak intensity. So, here it is mainly used in case of proton NMR. The size of the peaks of in the NMR spectra can give information concerning the number of nuclei that is going to be arise out of means present, okay, which has given rise to that particular peak. So, this is done by measuring the peak area using an integration. So, whatever the peak area we get, we can integrate, and that will give you the total area, which will help us in understanding what is the number of nuclei which are actually involved in the formation of that particular peak, and thereby we can able to guess this is the number of protons present within the particular molecule, and we can predict based on the chemical shape values what could be the structure of the molecule. So, NMR instrumentation. So, in NMR mainly we are going to use an applied magnetic field. So, in between the applied magnetic field we have to place the sample, and sample here the NMR samples are going to be generally prepared. There is again in NMR we can based on the kind of sample we use, we can classify it as solid NMR and liquid NMR. So, if you go for solid NMR, since we have no need to dissolve the samples in any kind of solvents, we can directly use it and we can analyze the spectra. There is another called as liquid NMR. In case of liquid NMR, generally people are going to employ the different type of solvents for NMR. So, whichever the solvent people use it in the NMR spectroscopy, they always try to use a solvent. For example, if you are using water, it will be D2O, deteriorated water. If it is going to be in chloroform, CHCl3 is the formula. So, they are going to use the deteriorated chloroform, that is CdScl3. Okay. So, why? Because the solvent protons can interfere in the analysis, so that is why they are always going to take care. Even if they are going for C13 NMR for example, then they are going to make sure the carbon of the for example, chloroform is a solvent, then the carbon of the chloroform should be C14. So, which is not going to be involved in any kind of resonation. So, that solvent interference is going to be null, means reduced to 0. And why? Because solvent, if it is not going to get reduced to 0, so solvent can interfere with the data obtained through the NMR. So, how is going to be the total system? So, it is going to be consisting of applied magnetic field, the B1, and at the center there will be a sample holder or the probe. So, which is going to be placed into a chamber, which is coiled wire will be there through which the radio frequency is supplied, and then followed by that there is going to be detector. So, because whenever there is a resonation, there will be sweep supply is going to be there, which is providing the energy, or in other words like electricity for the applied magnetic field, and that is also connected, and which will measure what is the amount of magnetization which is actually happening and required to align in a particular direction, and that whole thing is going to be connected to a computer which analyze the whole data which is obtained and construct the spectrum out of it. So this is how exactly an NMR spectra is going to be means spectrophotometer is going to be look like. So there will be a large liquid nitrogen chamber, so which is a large chamber is going to be there which is supplied with the liquid nitrogen, because the dome is mainly consisting of a electromagnet, which is circular electromagnetic magnet will be there at the center. The sample holder tube will be there, wherein in a tiny glass tube of about like usually the sample holder is going to be a quartz holder, which is again made sure will not interfere with the NMR peaking, and it is going to be of about 0.5 centimeter diameter, and around 10 to 15 centimeter is going to be the length of the tube. So in which very small amount of sample will be taken, and it will be kept into the sample holder chamber, and it will be closed, and then the magnetism is going to be initiated. So generally this particular NMR spectrophotometer will not be actually radiating any rays, any kind of rays, but there will be a tiny magnetic field which is generated, but still there is a containment for that particular magnetic field which is generated. So still people suggest that it should be used very carefully. So, and if you come to the limitations of NMR, despite of all these particular upsides of NMR, because NMR is one of the very important technique. So molecular means structural determination of any particular molecule is established, and it will be confirmed whatever it is by either NMR spectroscopy or X-ray. But X-ray has one particular problem, that is you have to use always only solid material, and after the diffraction you will lose everything. But in NMR we do not lose the sample, but and at the same time you need not to solidify, you need to convert any kind of molecules into a crystal or a solid. So you can directly, in whatever the way it is available, we can able to analyze its structure in the form of either liquid or even in the form of solids. But disadvantage wise, there are several limitations for this. Okay, so there will be some situations are going to arise wherein analysis will become very difficult. So that is, for example, if the elements which are present within the molecule, okay, have little or no natural abundance, so then it is going to be a problem. For example, in case of C13, whenever we want to do analysis of it, so it is 11%, but whereas OS17 is 0.035%. So when you are going to go do any kind of analysis, NMR analysis, we have to use a method, so which can actually wherein we have to look into the molecule, and we need to see what all different types of nuclei is available, and the abundance of those nuclei, isotopes, which particular isotope is more abundant, and which can be helpful for NMR studying of spectral studies of that particular molecule. Then in NMR spectroscopy, once the data is generated, the data is going to be analyzed, and since here the data is not going to be a very simple data, because NMR is not going to be done like with only one single wave you are going to pass and just measure the outcome, because here waves is going, number of waves of different frequencies are going to be passed into the sample at the same time. Whatever the data which is going to be obtained, again it is going to be of huge data is going to be obtained, and interpreting all these particular information and converting into a spectral design is again a very important process, and it is not going to be complete without using the Fourier transform method, the higher mathematical system which will help us in converting the digits which are going to become in the form of resonation into an spectral thing. So, this is a smooth and regular between fixed limits, and during the scan radiation of certain energy in the form of sine waves is going to be recorded. This is what the Fourier transform method is. You can see this side on the left hand side. So, you can see the Fourier means normal signals, and on the right hand side you can see there is a FT signals. The next part of NMR spectroscopy is a two-dimensional NMR. Till now whatever I spoke is all about one-dimensional NMR, wherein only one particular property of NMR or the nucleus is going to be used in its study and the structural and functional determinations. Whereas with once, for example, if you are going to use a particular method and if it is not able to give you the more information, people look for another method. So, here in two-dimensional NMR what people have done is, here the first two-dimensional NMR spectroscopy was designed and proposed by Jean Jenner in 1971. The two-dimensional NMR allows one to circumvent the challenge by challenge many overlapping resonances can make interpretation of NMR difficult. So, by adding the environmental variables and thus introducing a second dimension to the resulting NMR spectroscopy or NMR resulting spectrum provides a data that is easier to interpret and open more of informations. See, this is how exactly two-dimensional NMR is going to be consisting of. In single dimension NMR generally it will have only three different parts. So, that is preparation, evolution and detection. Whereas in case of multi-dimensional NMR or two-dimensional NMR, there is another one process is going to be added, that is mixing time. Between the evolution and detection there is a mixing time. So, what is this preparation? Preparation is nothing but, so that is the relaxation part. Okay. So, it mainly under study of freshly prepared, for example, it is submitted either by decoupling experiment or just by transverse magnetization by the means of 90-degree impulsion. So, at an angle of 90-degree impulsion to the first impulsion, the energy is provided in the RF. So, which will give us the information about the molecule, that is a preparation time. Another is evolution time, that is chemical shift and spin-spin coupling evolve, and at this particular time domain which is incremented during 20 experiment. Then we come across with mixing time in which RF pulses are going to be applied and create observable transverse magnetization, and there is another, that is the reduction time, that is the, so whenever we get information, so we will get the information regarding the detection time. So, there are different types of two-dimensional NMR spectroscopy, 2D FTIR, 2D quasi, 2D noisy, like this. So, I will just stop here, I will continue with one more slide recording. Okay. So, concerned to the two dimensional and application of the NMR.